for leading us to this point now. Let me first do the honors, and since all the esteemed panelists have been introduced, just a couple of lines about them so that you know exactly what their roles are within their company. So let's start with that. My name is Ashutosh Sinha, and I represent the Economic Times as a senior editor. We have to my immediate left, Gauri Shankar Nagabhushanam, and Gauri oversees investment, development, operations, asset management, and strategic planning for CapitaLand Group's business parks in India. So that's quite a bit, Gauri. Ramesh Ramadurai to his left, he manages and he's a managing director for the company for 3M in India since 2019, and has earlier worked in different capacities at Shanghai, Manila, Minnesota, and other locations. So globetrotter among us. So that will be very important to get the inputs from him because of his worldview as well. Sohanjeet Randhawa from Volvo. He's been with Volvo Group since 1998, working with various functions with Volvo trucks, Volvo buses, and earlier has worked for ABB and Thermax. Sojwal Vora, Chief Supply Chain Officer at Manipal Hospitals, and over these last 6 years that he's worked with Manipal Hospitals, he's embarked on a transformational journey towards supply chain and procurement excellence, focusing on improved operational efficiencies. So that's his core. And Bidisha Nagaraj from Schneider Electric, VP Global Marketing. Bidisha has 25 years of cross-industry experience in marketing across technology and retail industries. She manages for Schneider the marketing function. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us and being with us for this so important. So we heard the numbers, and that already 1.5% does not look very scary, but 1.5% in the bigger picture, when we're talking of that 3% is what we're trying to prevent the earth from warming. That's so important. So which is why, so important, let me try and give you a little context, the big picture context, so that I'll try and give a little context on what the challenges are, what the bigger issues are, which we need to talk about as well. Building a greener economy together, because it's so important, because of the policymakers and companies both need to work together so that we can all work together, including individuals, not just companies, but also individuals, so that ultimately the bigger goal can be achieved. And that needs everyone's buy-in, as we say it in the corporate world. It needs everyone's cooperation. So you just heard a little bit about Green Yodha, but imagine if that practice goes across companies, goes across individuals. That's why. So everyone needs to be a part of this effort. Also, there is a larger picture of the Prime Minister, if you'd remember, at Glasgow last year, September or October that was, when the Prime Minister committed that India will have 50% of its energy from renewable sources. So he advanced, he said by 2030, from 40, he raised the bar to 50%. So that's a commitment that companies, and there are quite a few important companies here, a lot of you represent companies which are very important. So companies have to be as much an important part of this as much as individuals need to be. What's happening in India? We are talking about 24/7 power availability. So that part, partly I would say, has been sorted. We're also talking about the installation of the 175 gigawatts of renewable power by 2022. We're pretty much on course for that, barring, of course, given the realities of COVID. So the larger picture, the country is trying to address. Now, given the background that you heard from Mr. Patni, now just try and put a picture of how the larger building blocks are falling in place. And that is why I think it's so important, that we realize that this series of discussions that the Economic Times in partnership with Schneider is kicking off is so important. So that's what I wanted to talk about, and hence building a greener economy together is so important for all of us. Before I formally begin, let me just mention one thing. We'd like it to be interactive, so please feel free to ask questions. We'll try and take questions towards the end of the program after you've heard everyone. So please do make your notes, and so that you can ask some of your questions as well. So let me start with that little backdrop, or that little context setting. Let me start with the questions, and Gauri, if I can start with you. India has been urbanizing at a pace which, is pretty impressive for some of the India watchers. Lead buildings, we've heard of them as very important. Now, a lot of times it's been seen as somewhat of a marketing thing, but there is a core, there is a fundamental to it which is very important. What is changing in the industry?
I mean, to be honest, LEED and green building certification did start out as a differentiator, like anything that is new would start. Of late, it has almost become a necessity. It's no more a marketing gimmick, because right now we have 90% of our buildings are green, and probably in a couple of years we'll have 100% of them green. But that's not going to get us our tenants. The tenants are looking much more deeper. The end user is actually looking at what are you doing above and beyond just getting a certification. How are you? What digitization interventions are you undertaking to reduce your energy consumption? What are you doing to take smart irrigation? How are you ensuring that your water consumption in the park is going down? How are you ensuring that your heat, ambient heat within the building is going down? So all of these are being asked by the end consumer. Of course, it is more the corporate consumer who is aware. We had the gentleman sort of list out those 3,000 odd companies that have signed up to the sustainability pledge. They are the ones who are pushing down their organization. So their managers are asking all these tough questions. It has not yet come to the consumer, to the residential part of it, but the hope is at some point in time, there will be an awakening. I mean, the Yodha challenge is great, that it's a great initiative. So once it trickles down to the individual, probably we'll have that question being asked of residential developers as well, as to, are you really using sustainable practices? Is sustainability becoming a core part of your entire real estate cycle? Are your the design of your buildings, are they sustainable? Is your procurement sustainable? Are you using local material more? Are you recycling material? Are you using local plants? Gone are those days when you can put those palm trees in the middle of Bangalore and say, it's fancy. But now people are going to question, why do you want to have a palm tree in the middle of Bangalore? And it doesn't give you shade, doesn't give you breeze, it doesn't contribute enough oxygen. So are you using local plants, local trees which are meant to be used to reduce the ambient temperature around, so that you can walk freely. So all of these questions are being asked, and I think it's an initiative which everybody is participating in. A lot of learning has to be done. I mean, I would say we are just scratching the surface right now. But given the importance that it is being given by the governments, by the institutions, and media firms like you, I think the message will then go down. And hopefully we all awake, and like someone was telling, before it's too late, we do something about getting that. Yeah, 1.5% seems too small, but yeah, it's a difference between life and death, practically.
Yeah. So Ramesh, given the way technology is advancing, new materials are happening, it could offer different options for businesses, and we are focusing at the moment what businesses can do. How can they make a difference? How can they embark or enhance their sustainability practices? Given that you represent a very large global brand, what is that Indian companies need to do more and more so that we're on the right track?
Yeah,
I think it's a very broad question. So before I try to answer that, yeah, first of all, it's great that we have a session like this this evening. So thank you for having all of us here as panelists. You know, before I go to your question specifically, I think I always think about, I mean, the why we want to do this, all this is very well known. I mean, the data speaks for itself. I think today there is much broader alignment around the world than there was even, you know, a few years back, that we need to do it. So I think your question also goes to the heart of it, is saying how, you know, what do we need to do? What do companies need to do? So I also personally think about it in 3 or 4 different aspects. What can you do as an individual? Because this requires a huge change, not just in how we rejig companies or so, but even our own mindsets, our attitudes, how do we approach this whole thing, consciousness of green. I think that's very critical. So what do we do as individuals and families? What do we do as, you know, small residential colonies? What do we do as cities? Of course, what do we do as companies? And then how does government step in to set the rules and, as Ms. Natarajan said very eloquently, set the guidelines so that companies follow with or without extensions. Okay, so I think to your question about materials, how can companies? The most important thing is setting a baseline. I mean, you have to understand your baseline. You have to, you know, commit to your targets, and then you have to find pathways to get there. Pathways could be, depending on your industry, your pathways could be very different. For example, as a company, 3M has globally committed to invest, okay, that's the other part I'll come to, invest $1 billion over the next several years to get to carbon neutrality, to reduce water usage, and of course, to reduce plastic usage, okay. So one is the how do you get there, and then what's the financing that might be required to get there. I think both these have to be looked at hand in hand. And I think there are many opportunities to learn from others, to, you know, work with companies, you know, companies such as Schneider here, industry associations, etc., who really provide a lot of a body of knowledge for this. So I think it's a question of making those connections, but most importantly for management of companies to make the commitment that they want to embark on this journey. I think that's most important.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sojwal, in terms of the changes happening in technology and how that build-up can happen for the big change to happen, those little small nuggets of change, how do you drive it? I ask you specifically because of your broad area of work in the supply chain, where the impact could be seen very clearly.
Sure. Yep. Yeah, thanks for having me here, first of all, ET, and also green evening to all of you. I like that term, by the way, the term that is coined. So indeed, you know, being in supply chain, you know, I look at not just where I work or what I'm responsible for. I also look at, you know, on the supply side and then also on the client side, kind of the end-to-end. So from that standpoint, and I agree with some of the comments that are already made, it's no more just a CSR thing, you know, for corporates to just go and do like a checkbox done. It is indeed being, you know, people are seeing the benefits, corporations are seeing the benefits of happening, you know, whether it's sourcing locally is a big thing because you kind of really, you know, save a lot on freight, you have material that is relevant for the area that you're operational in. So trying to do that versus also improving your own processes, reducing your carbon emissions within your area of expertise, within your area of operations. We talked about Honorable Prime Minister's you know, an announcement about, you know, 50% renewable energy by 2030, right? I was just doing a mental math while, you know, hearing that at Manipal hospitals, and we see ourselves as we are the second largest in the country right now, 27 hospitals across 13 cities, and, you know, looking to continue to grow, expand our presence. And while we do that, we want to also be the leaders, not just in, let's say, our clinical efficacy or, you know, our social responsibility or stuff like that, or even technological improvements. We also want to be seen as socially relevant. So therefore, renewable sources today already contribute 50% of our energy needs across my, you know, 27 locations, and we are continuing to keep on expanding that, you know. So that's one thing. We already have these things that we are doing. LEED certification we talked about, right? I think we are among the few private hospitals in the country who already have LEED certified, platinum certified 2 of my hospitals in the CI category already. All our new hospitals that are being constructed are with the designed for LEED platinum certification guidelines. So we're trying to do that. We're trying to be the pioneer there in terms of also being green, over here. We're going to have a policy very soon on it as well. Materials, you spoke about it. I already see that in my supply chain, area. Prior to Manipal, I used to work for a corporation called Philips, and prior to that, G Healthcare. I've seen, and I've also worked across different departments. So I've seen that happening. The amount of material that's going in, we are already seeing, for example, MR machines that are very common, use a lot of helium. That's not really good, greenhouse gas emissions. So low helium MRs is what companies are coming up with. And we are then saying, okay, you have a machine that's like that, I'd like to be your first partner to be there. It helps me not just say I have a fancier machine to work with. It also helps me to say, hey, by the way, I also am contributing to the green evolution. So lower reduction of plastics. We've been working with 3M also for such a long time, and I've also seen how technology has evolved, the type of materials that are being used. I'm seeing on the supply chain side a lot of suppliers. Unfortunately for me, being a hospital, a large part of my suppliers are large corporations, like many of these corporations over here. So they have their global standards. So I don't really have to work a lot with them, because it's kind of becoming a sharing of information between them and us to see how we can move forward together on this journey.
Sohanjeet, in terms of as a global brand, the local practices and the best learnings from the global teams that you see, can you put that in perspective? Because you represent the manufacturing sector here.
Yeah.
And there, as we just heard it from Mr. Patni, if you can measure it, you can improve it. Yeah. I think that applies.
Yeah, so maybe I should start from what we're doing globally, which is exactly what drives us locally and what we do here. Globally, we have actually embarked during the COVID period and stated that we're looking forward to a future which is 100% fossil-free, 100% safe, and which is 100% more productive. And with that, we have now committed ourselves to a net zero target for 2050, but for us, 2050 means 2040. That means because our vehicles run for 10 years, so because of that, we need to have been selling 100% vehicles which are fossil-free by 2040. Now this generates a lot of things to do. And this becomes a major transformation exercise across the company, because the targets are global. It affects us here in India too. So it's a business transformation across the world, and a huge amount of digitalization, innovation, new technology. So by 2030 already, 50% of our Volvo trucks will be electric. So this is going to happen in India too. Now, the impact in India is going to be across our supply chain, where we already started working with our suppliers in terms of innovation and sustainability discussions periodically. We have quite an ambitious target for the 2025 itself to reduce the carbon footprint with the suppliers. And India is a land of contrast. So while you have small suppliers who actually may not be the ones who will invest so much, and we need to handle and support them, but we also have people in India who actually are world-class. And they will get carbon neutral faster than many of the larger companies. Then, of course, in India, when we come to manufacturing, we actually have a higher target than the global target put on us. And the reason may be because we are a slightly different company. We are not as intense manufacturing there. But nevertheless, we, of course, part of the net zero exercise. But in India, our manufacturing setup is going to already 70% renewable energy. We'll go into 80% in the coming years. And finally, 100%. We're already down to about 50% rain catchment water for ourselves. Next year, we hope to reach about 85% only from rainwater, the rest from the rest. And then we will go forward. We're using small systems like IoT systems across our power, energy, and water to make sure we know exactly what's going on in the company and where the things to be addressed in this regard. And solid waste. And the typical thing everybody in manufacturing does, energy, solid, and water. But the biggest thing is that the entire transformation which is taking us forward towards this net zero and the future which will be electric, hydrogen fuel cells, including in combustion engines, but only on fossil-free fuels, is going to have a major dose of influence from India. Because the number 2 product development site in the world for Volvo Group is in India. Electromobility, hydrogen fuel cells, ADAS systems, digitalization, we're doing research here. The digital transformation, which will lead to all these changes which are going to happen, is going to happen a large part from India because the number 2 global digital site is here. So I don't know if I answered everything about what you asked, but I think I gave a good example of where we are. We are going forward in our local exercises, including recycling and circularity.
So certainly some of those products of the future, keeping the green practices in mind, could be, the prototypes at least could be coming out of India.
Yeah, why not? Of course, I will not say when and how, if.
Of course.
It's a global transformation. It has to impact us in India. And things could happen faster or later, but it will happen. Some countries will move fast, some will slow, but all will have to move that direction if we want a better future.
Okay, Bidisha. Now, homes. Everyone lives in a home. Everyone has a home to look forward to. That could be a big factor for change. After all, you know, everything begins at a home. How could that be the future thinking, if we can think of making things sustainable beginning at homes?
Right. Firstly, thank you, everybody, and green evening. I think that's kind of catching on. You know, I think it's a great topic to end the week with. I want to say a couple of things here before I answer your question. One is that we all have to know that anything green is equal to cost saving. Okay? There is an economical reason why, apart from, of course, saving the planet, which is a very important part of it, but people who are handling the balance sheet should know that ultimately it is about saving cost, and there is a way. The second thing is, we all need to know that buildings and homes being part of buildings contributes to about 30% of the carbon emission of this world, right? So, like you said, we need to first clean up our homes and then move out. Now, if I look at where India is and where India is going to go to in the next 5 to 10 years and where some of the other economies have already moved to, there is a huge potential. Today in India, I think home automation has just come about, which is a great thing. But I do want to say that there is a big path ahead, right? Home automation allows you convenience, functionalities, efficiency, etc., which is great. But we need to get to a stage where on our phones, we can figure out what is the energy consumption of every single consumer durable in the house. Because if you don't measure that, what are you going to save? You know, you're just going to randomly say, okay, switch off the lights, etc., etc. That doesn't work. So we need to go to a stage, and we have technologies that will enable every single consumer durable in the house to be measured. And like Deepak said, what you can't measure, you can't save. And what you can't save, you can't, there is no cost saving. So that's step 2, and we have technologies to get us there. Then the question is that, okay, I can measure, but how do I save, right? One is, of course, switch off lights, etc., but that probably is not practical. Then the next stage is, what is the kind of technology we need to introduce in our homes that allows for energy movement to the different consumer durables in an efficient way? So you can monitor that, right? So that's another stage. The other stage is where you have what we call the home energy management system, where, like we have our distribution boards, think of it, you have one central backbone in your home that controls, of course, your entire automation, that controls through your phone every single durable, that allows you to manage, monitor, etc., etc. Then, of course, what we call the beginning of prosumers, right? We can all be prosumers. Prosumers are people who are producing energy and consuming it, which means you put up solar panels, right? And that's the way you produce energy, you store it, and you consume it. So you are being completely self-sufficient in your energy consumption, and you are only consuming what you produce. That's the ultimate end of it. Now, what that can happen is, you can charge your entire house, you can charge your consumer durables. Remember, we're talking about electric vehicles. You can charge your vehicle, right? The entire center, energy center, will have your EV link, will have your inverter, have your battery, will have the entire energy backbone of your house. So the reason why I'm saying this is that before we know, it's going to come to India. So while some of us are still dragging our feet on home automation, etc., it's a great thing, but I think with energy costs going up, our energy bills are skyrocketing. Maybe it's not right now, but it will be. It's high time that we think about automating our homes. And there are very, very good technologies. Schneider has, by the way, I'm not trying to sell anything here, but I'm just saying that there are technologies available which allows you to measure, monitor, control energy that's going into every consumer durable. So, and then finally, we all want to produce our own energy. What a wonderful world that will be, and consume it. So that's where we are heading with home energy management.
So you mean to say, if I have a smart management system for a small power need, somewhere in the hills, I could go and just settle there, or anyone here could just go and settle there? If they could manage maybe a small community there?
Of course, we have, we have microgrids.
Yeah.
So you
also,
can,
these are off-grid.
Yeah,
and
then eventually you just put up solar panels. So you're not, you are not relying on any energy that's coming from the grid. I was in the US a couple of weeks back, and I was fascinated to see the Tesla solar rooftops. Where we work with Tesla. So they put up their solar panels, we help with the inverters, etc. So look, everybody is conscious of the fact that energy is good quality energy, which is electricity, which Deepak spoke about, is the need of the hour. And eventually, clean energy is what we need to go to. And renewables and solar, even at home, is probably the best bet. But before going there are steps. It's an evolution. You don't just suddenly say that I want to put up solar rooftops, because we stay in multi-dwelling places, there are apartment buildings, so even for the builder community, they need to start thinking about this eventuality.
Okay, that's an interesting one. So we get back to the homes then. That is at the heart of it. But given the sheer scale of the industry and how much of industries feed into the real estate sector, that's the broader question. Is the sector readying itself so that some of these questions about, green supplies and these downstream suppliers, so to say, becoming as green, or, at least beginning the journey towards that?
I think definitely the journey has begun. For example, just like, for Manipal, he was talking about, how much of renewable energy that we use. 35% of our parks are powered by renewable energy. We are setting up a power plant for a captive and a group captive scheme down south in Tamil Nadu, which is going to supply renewable energy just for our own parks. And we are expected to be about 45-50 million square feet in 3 to 4 years. And a lot of it is in data center, and we expect our own energy consumption to be about closer to 1 gigawatt. Watts, and just for that we need to set up a 1 gigawatt plant which can power our own needs. So it's a captive source, and it is clean, and it is something which our end consumers, our tenants want. So I think there is something called a green premium that is there, which is where the gap is right now. So it's not a question of intention. I think everybody intends to do it, It's the cost arbitrage that is there. Now, can I get it in an economical manner? Because ultimately it's the economics that, I mean, there's talk of Tesla. I mean, the first, battery powered car was launched in the late 80s, but it was a commercial failure. So the technology has to evolve so that it becomes economical. So if we want to so-called greenify the entire value chain, I think the green premium has to be brought down to something which is acceptable to everyone. Otherwise, there'll be a lot of talk but nothing much in action. And I think, from a policy perspective, there's a lot of things which happen. Say, for instance, can we set up a power plant, a solar power plant in Tamil Nadu, and can I supply, loop into the grid, and can I draw it in Rajasthan? It is possible technically, but from a political, from a administrative perspective, does it work? There are challenges. For instance, even try getting your license for setting up a solar power plant in your own home. I mean, one of my colleagues was trying to set it up. He says he has to jump through hoops to get the local electricity department to, because you need to get their permission. And the other thing is, they are looking at this as a competition. I've already set up so much capacity. Now you're going to have your own captive source, which means, what happens to the capacity I've built. So there is this, pushback that comes from the existing, power supply companies as well, and discoms as well. So I think all of these have to be, crossed over, thought through, and for sure we will get there. But the question is, do we know the urgency, and how soon can we get there? Is something which I think all of us collectively need to address, and this forum is a great forum to do that.
Ramesh, in terms of some of the challenges, because you've worked at so many different places, seen different markets, how they operate, what are some of those challenges that companies face in driving better sustainability and maybe energy efficiency, and some of those practices which will make companies forward-looking?
So a couple of things I'd like to point out. Number one is, we at 3M, we are a materials company. We come up with different types of materials, very broad portfolio to address different industries. So for us, it's really imperative to understand our customers' roadmap. So without that, you're not going to be coming up with materials to address their sustainability roadmap and requirements. I mean, if you talk about automotive, it's, obviously it's lightweighting, reduction of emissions. Now, of course, electric vehicles, so thermal management. So then you work back to see what is your portfolio, how does your portfolio go in sync with what your customers are doing. So I talked about some of the automotive areas. Similarly, if you go into whether it's in the homes or whether it's in the hospitals, like Sojwal was talking about. So everywhere, understanding the technology roadmap of customers is very critical. Sometimes it's with large OEM type of customers, nothing is easy, but at least you can have a conversation. Sometimes when you're trying to identify insights through a broader, a more fragmented market, it's a little more challenging, okay? So I think it's easy to say we have to understand the technology trends, but it's not always that apparent always, when you're trying to look 5, 10 years, 15 years out. I think the second part is a little more, well, I don't know if I should characterize it as mundane, but even inventorying your emissions footprint, etc. Scope 1, Scope 2 is, it's a lot easier to do than Scope 3. Then when you get into Scope 3, it gets a lot more complicated. And then you're still trying to figure out, different chapters and how do you do it. So I think even for a company of our size and breadth, it makes it even more challenging because you have operations in so many different countries. You have a broad manufacturing footprint. You have sites all over the world. So I think getting to that, and it's important, I think, to have, even if it's not with 100% accuracy, but at least even if you get to 50, 60, 70% to start with, I think characterizing Scope 3 also, we shouldn't completely lose sight of it. I think it has to be started at some point in time. I think, and the third one is, I think, as technologies move forward, I think we need to have a very strong mechanism to stay connected with the startup world, because there's just so much happening in the startup industries around the world, in academia, in institutions. So it's not always the well, the legacy companies have all the answers and the solutions. So do you have good processes and systems to stay connected with a lot of these emerging hubs where new ideas, new technologies may be coming up? What is your process that you have in your company to identify, map, and be aware of the technology, intensity, patents, commercial viability? How do you even track it? Because obviously you can't invent everything yourself. So how are you doing it? So I think all of these are opportunities. I mean, it's kind of cliche to say that, but definitely there are challenges, but there are also great opportunities.
Okay, very interesting for the opportunities that you talk about, partnership with even startups. Sohanjeet, the automobile sector, particularly since India is such a large market, particularly for two-wheelers.
Yeah.
Cars, we may not be as big, but is that an opportunity that you see? Because the learning comes from some of those more nimble-footed who may not have the legacy as he's referring to.
Yeah, of course, I think in the automobile industry, the biggest step change which has happened in the last 3 to 4 years, 5-6 years, is that we used to build the product entirely ourselves. Today, the future which I just mentioned before is at least 10 big partnerships. For instance, we now have a partnership with Samsung on batteries. We have a partnership with NVIDIA and Aurora on automation. We have a partnership with Traton on charging stations. Then we have a partnership with SSAB for green steel, which is a major component of thing. And then the biggest thing is, in the future which we are talking about, we are partnering with our biggest competitor, Daimler, for fuel cells, which would never be imagined what's happening before. So when you say in India, when two-wheelers, small players, have a major role also. We have a separate group inside Volvo called Campix. It's the innovation hub, which you may understand, which is primarily focused on building partnership with startups, academia, and bring in fresh ideas and accelerate the innovation and the business transformation. Because if you don't do it in this manner, the typical legacy system will take on its own time and wait. So startups will play a big role, and that's why the number 2 site, everything is number 2 now, in India, is the second Campix site of the Volvo Group. Happens to be in India. We started last year. Already about 70 startups are being engaged with, and they come from all experiences. So even though we are heavy vehicles, our electric solution or our fuel cell solution is totally different from a two-wheeler. But the experiences they're carrying, people like that, are massively important for us, could be potentially very useful going forward.
Okay. Sojwal, in the healthcare sector, also from beyond just the immediate part that you see, a lot of people coming from, customers coming from outside the country. You would expect that tomorrow there'll be a situation where global people, let's say hypothetically coming from Europe, would like to check out on some of these practices that you have. How do you benchmark yourself against some of the global practices and the emerging ones so that you're on top of the game?
Yeah. So I'll start off by saying that the conversation around startups that was happening, I'm seeing that also myself a lot within the healthcare space. A lot of these smaller companies are coming up, startups who are actually wanting to contribute to the overall healthcare paradigm in India. They come up with solutions that kind of link the healthcare services with the existing machines that we have, for example, from Philips or Siemens or GE, and bring it together. We see a lot of these paperless modes of engaging with patients coming up through these type of partnerships that we're seeing. So that's and this really works very well. I mean, we're talking of overseas patients coming in, right? But we're also seeing that within the country also a lot of this migration happens because not every corner of India is well served in terms of medical needs. So even for those type of cases, we see that now there are solutions that you don't really need to carry your reports around wherever you go, stuff like that. So of course that helps. Other than that, there are regulations, there are guidelines, JCI guidelines that are required to be followed for if you want to be a certain category of hospitals. So we do that because those accreditations actually help us place ourselves at par with the best that's available globally in the world. So that's something we try to actively do as well.
Okay. Bidisha, in terms of the global best practices, because you said some of these solutions, some of these opportunities could come. What are some of those global best practices too that could come to the Indian market, be available for the people?
I mean, there are lots of them, right? Again, I do want to stick to the home topic because I think we're a large population in the country, and all of us have a trail of a carbon footprint, and if we can address that, I think we will become we will hand over a better generation to our next. Hand over a better planet to our next generation. Now, I was quite honestly fascinated. I spoke to you about prosumers. I was quite fascinated when I saw that in the US today, in the state of California, where there is a mandate that every new building that comes up has to have a solar rooftop, period. Right? That's a mandate. So I was very fascinated, and I spoke to a few home builders, I spoke to electricians, and the entire value chain. And look, even in the US, everybody is struggling. I mean, so we have an interesting situation is where we have a solution, but we don't have an installer. The electrician is saying, hey, give me a few months to figure out. You guys are moving really fast. So I think there's a lot that's happening, but it's not just about products and offers and solutions. I think we need to get the ecosystem ready, because a lot of times if the ecosystem is not ready to enable sustainability into your doorstep, then no matter how good your products and solutions are, it's not going to cut. So I think we're seeing some very, very good work from the US, Germany, of course, Sweden, France, where their biggest problem is electricity cost. And so they're going all out to put in technologies where energy flow into the houses is controlled, et cetera, et cetera. So I think when I look at where we are and where we are going to go with the big, bold ambitions that our Honorable Prime Minister has, I think we need to be mentally ready that it's all coming, because even at a home level, there will be directives that will come for the homes, and all of us will be running to, get ourselves more energy efficient. I do also want to say one thing, a small initiative that we did recently. Some of you must have read it in the papers. When we're talking about carbon emission, it is businesses, it is homes, it is everything, but entertainment, sports, right? It's something that we did recently. We explored cricket and sustainability. All of us love cricket. But do you know that one day-night match, T20 match of IPL, we partnered with Rajasthan Royals, emits 10,000 tons of carbon dioxide, which is, and it's just not the stadium. It is when we are watching them, we're watching it in television, we have multi-screens, etc. Players traveling to and fro, all of that, it's 10,000 tons. Now that is equal to, one cricket match is equal to 20 lakh homes emission, right? So carbon emission is coming from everywhere. And I think the reason why we did this partnership is to just tell everybody, we're all gung-ho about every single cricket match we watch, but guess what? There's a huge footprint. And of course, as a company, we are trying to offset it, et cetera, but I think the entire Green Yodha movement was started to just get everybody's mindset, community together saying, we need to do something about it. It's about time, because unlike cricket, we don't have a second innings. We have just one innings.
Well, these days cricket also doesn't have a second innings.
Oh,
You know,
well.
T20 and ODIs, they don't.
Watch football.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Again, football
Yeah.
also has a lot of
The
content.
rules
Yeah,
of the
I'm
game are
joking.
changing, as they say.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're pretty much trying to squeeze in one more question. So for each, if you can be brief, what is the biggest change that you see, Gauri, happening in your sector regarding sustainability that could, you know, something that over the next maybe 3 to 5 years that everyone should keep an eye out for, and that could be a game changer, if I can say so?
I would say other than renewables, renewable energy, I think that's definitely on. That's going to be the first thing.
That's the scale of it.
That's the scale of it. It's I think at some point in time, I would say 100% of all the business parks that are there are going to be powered at least 60-70% by renewable energy, in the next 7 to 8 years. That's happening. Water efficiency, we are almost there. That is going to be happening. What I think the biggest point that's going to sort of, the game changer is going to be, IoT devices. The ability to, bring in IoT devices, measure, at every single point, at every single interaction, how your efficiency is being, consumed, what is being consumed, how it is being consumed, how are you going to maintain, all those data points are getting collected. So the startup ecosystem that you're talking about, for instance, a very simple thing, we have solid waste. Usually solid waste, you could only recycle part of it. So there's a startup which came about and talked to us and said, we call it the trash bot. So it takes all the solid waste from our park, segregates into which is biodegradable and which is not biodegradable. Biodegradable goes back into our landscaping and maintenance of our gardens and parks. The non-biodegradable goes forward and they make planks out of it. And these planks are being used as shuttering material for construction.
Wow. They're
being used as your pots or for holding your plants or for cupboards, for chairs. And it's quite cost effective as well. So I think it's just the start of that ecosystem is just about coming together. I think we need to watch out for IoT devices stepping into our homes, making it, first it's going to measure us and then it's going to give us solutions for how we can be more efficient. And the whole startup environment, I think India is probably the top 2 in the world right now. So that's where the game changer is going to be.
Okay. Ramesh, in terms of the industries that you feed in and drive the change, essentially because the kind of materials that you make, what could be the big game changer for sustainability?
Yeah, I think very clearly for, a lot of our materials also have chemicals in some form or the other, plastics, chemicals, input materials that come from those feedstocks. So it's very clear at a high level, the feedstock mix will change. It may take several years to change, but that process is already well and truly underway. So moving from chemical feedstocks to more bio-based, etc., that's going to be a huge, huge game changer. And I think not only for us, how we make our products, but also how we work with customers and work with them for their products, and how we can support them with materials for their sustainability journey. So this is a huge transformation on a global basis. It's already underway, and I think that's something we just have to be, we have to be ahead of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sohanjeet, in terms of Volvo, you've mentioned about some of the, how the products that you make of the future could be worked out of India, developed out of India. In terms of sustainability, what could be the big game changer for your industry, which is already being disrupted?
Yeah. I think there are 3 trends which are already spoken quite often, which are the major driving forces of the way the industry is totally transforming. Electromobility, including hydrogen fuel cells, which is also electric, connectivity, and automation. It's happening far faster than anybody realizes. All these things are actually happening on road, automated vehicles, etc. But I think the real game changer, keeping in mind the kind of transformation we're looking into and the fact that the future is not lending itself to you very clearly, it's kind of coming in grays and light grays to tell you what's happening. The biggest game changer will be leadership, the human factor, the learning, the skill development, the clashes between people who need to get jobs and the new kind of jobs coming. So the leadership in this transformation will be the biggest factor, and the people who get leaders, whether it's a nation, whether it's industrial companies, whether it's the city of Bangalore, promoting public transport, just to say, from my perspective, the leadership will really make all the difference because we're bringing together stakeholders. She mentioned the ecosystem, all that. And what today now Schneider is doing, the Green Yodha, is leadership in its own fashion, bringing people together. So I think, and taking the maximum potential out of the human beings living and what we can give, building open minds, it'll be required because it's going to be a very special future we're having.
Sojwal, in the healthcare sector, what should the people or the wider industry look forward to in terms of the game-changing opportunities?
I'll answer this in two ways.
Sure.
One is, I think while the corporates are trying to do what they can do, large corporations, have their policies around it and trying to make things work. The common man on the ground has to also pitch in. So there has to be a change in mindset. Even for example, she's talking of home automation, right? That's a great thing. We're here with the Green Yodha. That's a fantastic initiative, from Schneider. But a simple thing like, the stirrer that's used in our coffee, it's typically that small plasticky thing, the transparent one with the two cylinders attached. Can we move that out and bring in a wooden or a bamboo-made one? So once you start thinking on the very basics, where can I contribute? How can I make myself carbon neutral, right? So it has to start from there. And then obviously, you move on and, for example, we have, heat pumps where we actually feed in water which is preheated from solar so that the energy consumed by the heat pump is lesser. I mean, those are complex things. But again, we have to start from the grounds up and extending that to, you actually talked about how we can have this, it saves cost, right? That's what you mentioned, right?
Yeah.
So the cost savings comes over a period of time. It's an integral cost saving that you get. Today, when I change an LED bulb, at home, I'm spending more in the beginning, but over a 10-year life cycle, I'm going to save money. Right. Same thing, we partnered with Schneider recently for one of our hospitals. For the UPSs that we have, we moved from the conventional battery sources to lithium-ion. But then, I had to do a lot of, pitching internally to say, hey, by the way, don't look at the initial capex. It's a capex-intensive thing. Let's look at how it saves money over longer term. So the thought process cannot be that I want everything today to be better than what I would get from my conventional sources of energy. I have to look at it as an integral cost over the life cycle of that product or that solution. That is one. And the last thing, for me, we talk of carbon neutrality, and I also was, the graph that was shown in the beginning by Deepak was pretty striking, where even if you, whoever is committed, and if we kind of just go with that, we are still remaining flat over a period of time, right? It's not really going down. So somewhere that carbon neutrality also over time has to change to being a carbon positive. What that means is basically if I am consuming something and I'm giving back the same amount, I'm carbon neutral, right? Here I'm going to look at beyond that, how can I also take out some more carbon that someone else is creating, right? Sure. So I may go out and say, oh, by the way, my cost, I am carbon neutral for this project. I will make sure that as I run this project for the next 5-6 years, I will do stuff to keep myself carbon neutral. But hey, by the way, I'm going to go and plant 10,000 trees somewhere else. I'm going to keep doing that over a period of time. So I'm going to negate the effect of carbon neutrality that someone else is creating. So when everyone starts thinking in those lines, that's when we'll be able to bridge that gap to that 1.5% that we are talking about. So carbon positivity is what is the next thing for me beyond carbon neutrality.
Okay. So Bidisha, we've heard several industries talk about that. Now it's about everyone being a part of it. Anything that you would like to suggest? How can everyone here, maybe everyone who's listening, everyone who comes across, be a part of it?
Well, I think stand in that little podium there, take a picture and become a Green Yodha. That's, I think, the one thing that all of us need to do. But there's one thing that I want to sum this up, saying that sustainability, like I think somebody in the panel said, is no longer like a CSR effort anymore, right? if you look at all the things that we're talking about, sustainability is in the center of any, it's in the center of life, it's in the center of business, it's in the center of existence, right? Sustainability leads to efficiency, cost saving, a better experience of life. The one thing that I forgot, and I missed saying it, which is very, very important from a home perspective, is safety. Today, if you look at the number of buildings, we keep hearing the papers every other day, this building has caught fire. If I look at outside of India, there are tornadoes, there are storms, there is this. Now, imagine in your phone, if you get an alert saying, there is a storm coming, be ready, right? Because what happens with, or there is a fire that's coming up somewhere in your DB or in your panel or somewhere, imagine if you get the alert. Now, why would you not want to embrace sustainability? I mean, I rest my case beyond this. And that's the game changer that we're talking about from a home situation. I think my esteemed panels spoke about all the other industry stuff. I want to say from a home's perspective, cost saving is one, home automation is one, experience is another one. All the good stuff is great, but I think the central part of sustainability is that it leads to safety, and you cannot negotiate and fool around with safety. So I just want to say that become a green Yodha in your own ways. I love the fact that people spoke about leadership, people spoke about mindset shift, people spoke about adoption of somebody somewhere is doing carbon offsets. Did we even know that a stadium, one game does 10,000 tons of carbon emission? No. So obviously something is somewhere. When we go for a movie hall, there is carbon emission. So in our own ways, if we can use weekends to just offset carbon in our own ways, plant more trees, do a garbage cleaning, do whatever. I think that's the only which way we will be able to just about meet the 1.5 degrees. Otherwise, in places like Rajasthan, from 5 years from now, we are talking about 52, 53 degrees centigrade in summer. So I just want to end it with that. So thank you so much.
Coming as I do from Delhi, I can imagine what 48 and 49 are. I mean, it feels blessed to be in this city after that. Okay, some questions. We'd love to take some questions. And if you have questions on the topic, okay, can we please, sir, the request is if you can identify yourself and address the question to whoever, please. If you can have the mic there, please.
Hi, my name is Sumaya. I'm from Prestige Constructions, but my question is not about constructions. It is more of a personal knowledge I wanted to understand from the automobile industry, and if somebody from Schneider also on this question. There's a lot of talk about electric cars everywhere, and we seem to find that electric cars might be the game changer in India. But there are two or three points which I want to understand from you, because you must be discussing this in your ecosystem and how it's going to develop. The first is the batteries. The batteries needs cobalt and battery needs lithium, and neither of them are available in India. I think cobalt is mostly available in Congo. 50% is mined by Chinese, and the 50% is...
So if you can stick to your question, please.
Yeah, so 50% is coming out of blood. And then even if we get the batteries in, we have to charge them with fossil fuel. And then even if you have the fossil fuel, and after 10 years, what happens to the B waste, which is going to come up out of E-waste?
Yeah.
So is there any discussion on these three topics to, can you connect the dots between the three and the ecosystem?
Yeah. This, of course, is a discussion which happens. And first of all, when it comes to the rare metals which you're talking about, companies which will have to be responsible will have to go through a supply chain audit and make sure that their supply chain takes care of not getting into any of the issues which you mentioned while procuring the batteries, say, from a partner like Samsung, anybody. So that is one part. But the fact that we are dependent upon certain areas, just the way we are today dependent upon oil from other parts of the country. But the only solace there is currently in the current technology is that these lithium, etc., which we are dependent upon, is a smaller percentage of the total battery. It's not the entire battery cost. So if you have 100 rupees of oil being imported, you are dependent upon lesser than 100 rupees in this case. Just to rationalize a bit, it's not the final answer. Maybe some country doesn't give us anything, we will be lost. But compared to the oil scenario, it's a little less dependent in that front. Of course, electric vehicles are more efficient, the motor, so that means the energy consumption is much more better used, so then again you depend a bit less. It is true that if you don't use renewable energy, so if you are using dirty energy, then it's not a very good idea. That even if you have electric vehicles, the battery production uses much more energy than a typical production of, the diesel engine, for instance. But renewable fuel is in the pathway of India, so that will be taken care of. So eventually you have the ecosystem. It's going to take a lot of time to build the ecosystem. So it's good people have started. So eventually renewable fuel will parallelly come together. So it is going to be better than before. In spite of those issues. We are dependent now, we'll be actually lesser dependent. But I'm sure nobody sold everything, things will happen, and they will take care. And the last part about disposing thing. So for instance, we have a separate company created now, only for that purpose, called Volvo Energy, and their entire job is to look into the life cycle of the battery. So you need to take care of the battery when it's in operation in your life, first life, the health, to understand what levels it is to be charged, etc. All this digitalization brings in data which helps you to understand the battery, the application of the vehicles, very, very fine-tuned to elongate and lengthen its time. Then the second part is to figure out the reuse and the second life of the batteries, which has been very, very actively being discussed. And then to find how to repurpose the battery for, say, buildings, to storage and use them there. And then the final disposal of the batteries. Currently in our world, at least, it's still small. It's going to grow big. That's a lot of research is going on that part, and it's being developed. So it's all happening and being discussed. And there's a good concerns which you put up, which everybody is making sure it doesn't stop the
Ramesh,
boat.
would you like to add in terms of
Sure,
new materials that could emerge?
Not so much materials, but I just wanted to make, I think Sohanjeet already touched on it briefly, is you're probably familiar with the concept of EPR, that's the extended producer responsibility. In plastics, it's very, it's there broadly in plastics today. There will be, I think there will be, I'm not 100% sure, but I think it might have already been issued for rubbers and tires as well, for EPRs. And similarly for materials like what you're talking about in EVs, lithium-ion and so on, there will be EPR guidelines coming out, I think. I mean, exactly when it'll come out, what form it'll come out, I'm not 100% sure. But there will be, to Ms. Natarajan's point earlier on, there will be government guidelines and directions on how this should also be conducted. So one is, companies, like he said, are already investing in research to figure out what's the most efficient way to reuse, reclaim, reuse, etc. But there will also be some form of EPR guidelines coming out in these areas. Yeah.
Any further questions? Okay. Can we have the mic here, please? Yeah, please. If you can identify yourself and ask the question.
Sure. Hello.
Yeah, please.
Hello. Yeah, my name is Gopal Sutar. I am from HAL. I have this question on, we have been talking so much about green, talking about green evening, and you referred to green steel. What about this black gold, coal? The Coal India shortages we're talking about day in and day out, and the government has got the emergency meeting in the last few days. There is a serious shortage of coal, and we refer that as a dirty fuel. But they are talking about green coal as well. My question is, are we realistic in thinking about replacing these kind of fossil fuels, whether it is coal? Because BP, on the other hand, is talking about, or it's even saying that there is no question of petrol or diesel totally getting replaced. So there is a lot of, there's a gap between what's going to happen and what, do we have to have something called a mixed kind of energy system?
Ramesh, would you?
Okay. I'll take a shot at it. I don't think I know the answers exactly to your question. But I look at it as, broadly speaking, any transition is never going to be a linear pathway. It is going to be, up and down. It's going to be not without the challenges along the way, not without the thorns along the way. What is the ultimate mix that we end up with? I think there have already been some projections made. Yes, the current situation on coal supply-demand imbalances may be temporary imbalances due to various factors, including peak demand going above 200 gigs and so on. But I think in the long run, the direction is fairly clear. At what level will coal kind of stop in India? You also have to take into account the age of the assets and at what point, what is the financial implication of retiring some of those assets. If we can, build retiring of assets into the model, then at what point can you do it? Otherwise, it will, of course, live to its useful life. So yes, it's going to be, the path is not going to be absolutely a linear path. It's going to be a little bit of bumpy up and down, but I think we'll get there. But no more specifics than that,
I
I'm
also
afraid.
want to add that this scarcity actually is an opportunity for looking at cleaner electricity.
Yeah.
Let's look at it as an opportunity rather than saying, oh, there's no coal, there's scarcity, oh my God. It's going to push everybody to look at non-coal, non-fossil fuel energy sources.
Yeah. Okay, any further questions? So last question, we'll try and take one more if there is any. Okay. Looks like at the moment there's none. So just let me give you the broad, in a few sentences, what has been the conversation. What caught my attention from everyone here is the emphasis on startups and how they're contributing to multiple industries in terms of what sustainability action should happen and also in aiding some of the actions that companies are taking. That was important. From Schneider point of view, the energy management systems, that caught my attention, and I would look forward to it, and I'm sure some of you will. It was very interesting to hear from you about the kind of sustainable action or sustainability practices that the real estate industry is doing. So that water part, and of course, what to look forward to. Of course, from Volvo's point of view, as well as 3M, the startups is what caught my attention. Mm-hmm. But as I sum up, I have one line to add from something I read many, many years ago, and this was specific to the energy or the power industry. And here's what it said, very short, sweet, and crisp words. Save energy, don't think. But today's world, we need to think and make sure that we're looking for a different kind of future for everyone among us. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining and being a part of this conversation. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you.